Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
Today's warehouse needs to keep inventory moving smoothly and quickly. Meet these challenges with on-demand warehouse labeling from Brother Mobile Solutions. Our mobile and industrial printers will help optimize your operations to achieve the speed, reliability, and durability your warehouse needs. With easy integration for existing warehouse technology, convenient portability, and upfront affordability, Brother Mobile Solutions is at your side when it comes to warehouse labeling. Try one for free today by visiting brothermobilesolutions.com/new warehouse or click the link in the show notes. That's brothermobilesolutions.com/new warehouse to try one for free today.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. Today's episode, I will be joined by Anil Varanasi. He is the CEO and co-founder at Meter, and Meter is bringing internet in a simple way to industrial spaces, particularly and especially in the warehousing industry now as well. So we're going to talk to Anil about the Meter story a little bit, and we're also going to talk to him about how their solution differs from traditional Wi-Fi, and also why it's so unique and how it can get you up and running faster, and why now? Why are we doing this, right? So, Anil, welcome to the show. I know you've been a listener for a while, so it's great to get you on as a guest now. How are you?
Doing well, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me. I know it's common to say long-time listener, first-time caller, so I'll say that too.
Yeah, I like that. Okay. We're throwing back to the old radio days, right? It's good to have you on. Always happy to connect with the listener, and definitely been great to get to know you over the last couple of months here and learn about Meter. So tell us a little bit about Meter, and I guess tell us too, kind of how you came to found this company and what kind of hole was in the market that you decided that this was the need.
Sure. So we got started about 8 years ago, but in the first 5 years was mainly just R&D. Some of the things that we think about is in the spectrum of building a web app to SpaceX, Meter is somewhere in the middle of difficulty because of hardware, operating systems, radios, firmware, all that stuff. So how we came about building it is actually kind of, post, it's very easy sometimes to just romanticize about why you built something. Yeah. But ex ante, you're actually usually trying to just solve a problem for yourself.
Right.
Or you're really trying to see what is it that you can build. For us, it was a combination of both things. I had studied networking in college and something that I had been tracking for a long time. But even for someone like me, every time I moved office spaces for businesses I've run and worked at, or friends' companies that are even were engineers, it was just so difficult to get internet networking, Wi-Fi. So it's really time consuming, really expensive, and really you don't get great products. And the other thing we saw was, in 2012, there's a great essay that came out called Software is Eating the World. And it was written by Mark Andreessen, one of the people that ended up building the browser in the late 80s, early 90s. And what we saw was this massive explosion of technology going everywhere. Technology going to all sorts of industries, from logistics, life sciences, retail, healthcare, robotics, everywhere. Just technology and software going for it. And underneath of that, connectivity being so important. So we felt it was a bit incongruous given how important connectivity is, but yet how difficult it is. And we felt the pain ourselves.
Right.
That's how we ended up starting it. So again, we started about 8 years ago, and the first 5 years was just R&D, just building a lot of hardware, operating systems, security, reliability, privacy, all of that for internet networking, Wi-Fi, routing, switching, wireless, to make it so that all of this is fast, secure, and reliable.
Right. Interesting. And it's interesting there, you mentioned that some of these things, usually business ideas come from pain, right? So I'm curious, you mentioned there, a little bit as you're moving offices and things, and you found it difficult to get internet. But I'm curious, like, what was the actual breaking point where you're like, you know what, like, I'm going to do this myself. I'm tired of this.
I think honestly it was just like the complexity of it. If you're ever in a space with a few hundred people or a few hundred devices, any of it, getting great Wi-Fi networking working is just so challenging. And, you kind of revert back to, have you turned it off and on kind of thing.
Yeah.
But we saw that complexity be really hard. So the breaking point was actually not only our pain, it was actually technology. So if you think about technology companies in the past decade, from YouTube to self-driving cars to Twitch to Netflix to any of these, Facebook or live video with Instagram, anything like that, what's really possible is because networking got so much better in cloud, in data centers and servers. So the actual breaking point or switch over, or when our bit flipped, was not just our own pain, was when new technology started coming out that we knew that we could use to make this better. So right around 2012, 2013, 2014 is around the time when all of this got rewritten from the ground up, per se, for data centers and all of it. But nobody was taking that and applying that to local infrastructure. And as engineers ourselves, we saw this as an opportunity to go try building it, because we felt the pain ourselves as well.
Yeah, very interesting. And it's interesting you point out too that, how, just connectivity has evolved over time. And, it's interesting. I'm thinking back to, the days of dial up, and just thinking about, we're just lucky to be able to get on AOL for a little while without getting kicked off, and now we're able to go live and stream and do all these things in almost anywhere, actually. So it's pretty incredible, like, how we've evolved. And obviously, as we've evolved, we've needed bigger and better, stronger connectivity, which it sounds like you guys are bringing to the market. So tell us and explain to us a little bit about how Meteor works and what the difference is between, you mentioned in there, the traditional ways of getting connectivity can be painful. But tell us how Meteor is different compared to the traditional.
Yeah, so I'll walk through the traditional solution first, and then I'll kind of show a comparison on what Meteor does. Okay. So first, if you think about it today, let's say you're opening a new fulfillment center, distribution center, warehouse, 3PL, anything in that space at all. As soon as you sign the lease, you're going to go try to figure out, how do I get internet, networking, Wi-Fi? Exactly. It's the first thing you go do, right? Because you want your colleagues that work there to be productive. You might be putting up a WMS system. You might be getting some automation, robot, whatever the case. The first thing you'll go do is internet, networking, Wi-Fi. Yeah. So what do you go do? First, you have to figure out who all the ISPs are available, what the pricing is, who's actually coming to the building. Then you have to go figure out all the hardware and who's going to sell that hardware and what sort of hardware that you have to get. Yeah. Let's say you have a 250,000 square feet of a space, 500,000 square feet of a space. It's a lot of hardware. Oh, yeah. Then you have to go figure out who's going to install it. Then the question is like, well, now that I have a complex system, who's going to maintain it? So we're now talking about a lot of time spent by a team that's moving into a new space, a lot of capital. It's not uncommon for companies to spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on this, on installation, on surveys, on testing, on hardware. get the system going. Then you have to build a team out. Now, imagine if you're a multi-location warehouse company, multi-location 3PL, which is very common.
Right.
Then you have to figure this out. How am I going to build this team out in each city I'm in? Maybe I have one location on the East Coast and one on the West Coast. Am I really going to go build out a network engineering team on both coasts? Like, what's going to cost going to be?
Yeah.
So with Meter, what we've seen is really think about that experience and how can we make that better. Again, our goal is to take internet networking Wi-Fi, make it really easy, and make it really fast, secure, and reliable. And the way we do that is we design, deploy, and maintain all the hardware and software.
Okay.
So with Meter, all companies have to do is give us an address and a floor plan, and we'll handle everything after that. So we'll make sure the right ISPs get there. We're partnered with all the major ISPs, and we're ISP agnostic. So we'll make sure the right connections come in from primary and backup connections. Then we'll go build out all of the racks that need for routing, switching, for big warehouses like we talked about, like 250,000 square feet, 500,000 square feet.
Yeah.
There's multiple of these servers. We'll build all of that out. We'll go install all the hardware throughout the space so there's great Wi-Fi there.
Okay.
And then our software and our teams manage it for companies. So where the difference comes in is essentially 3 P's that we think about. One is process. Right. We take a multi-month, multi-vendor process and make it really simple. Just give Meter an address and a floor plan.
Yeah.
Then we're talking about product. What we've perfected over the last 8 years is hardware and software that's built for these environments that require a lot of bandwidth, low latency, and where connectivity is at the linchpin of the operations. So product that's entirely integrated is a big draw as well.
Great.
And lastly, it's pricing. We don't charge for hardware, installation, cabling, testing, all of it. We just charge a monthly fee to maintain this. And I'm happy to go into detail on why. Yeah. But where we're different again is make it a process that's really easy, a product that's built for these environments, and pricing that takes huge CapEx, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and makes it zero. Yeah. And huge OpEx, which is building out a networking team everywhere, and crunches that down to just a monthly maintenance fee. The really good precursor to all of this is when companies went from building their own data centers to using Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure. Right. That instead of spending time, capital, and building out a big team, you pay for what you use. So again, we'll do the process really well. It's a product that's built for these spaces, and pricing that removes huge CapEx and huge OpEx and just into a monthly fee.
Very interesting. And I think it's a great model because, as someone that's, done a couple brand new warehouses and had to live through the struggle of waiting for the network to be up, like as you mentioned, working with vendors and and then being told that we need to start shipping on this date, and the internet's not live, running to Verizon store and getting a hotspot and being able to ship out 50 square foot area within like a 275,000 square foot building. It's a learning experience, I'll call it that, to be nice, but I mean certainly taking that process and being able to speed it up and have it make a lot more sense. Like as you said, one of the big things is the support, like from IT staff, right? And you don't necessarily, especially if you're like a smaller to medium sized business, you don't really have like that robust staff that's equipped to do we're going to open a new building. Like we have the staff to make sure that this happens very quickly. So with that being said, I mean, if you look at time, right? So that's one of the big points here, right? Is like the time it takes to be able to get up and running. How long does it typically take Meter to get you connected versus like a traditional installation?
Yeah, so traditionally it can take months sometimes, and I'm sure
Right.
you've been through this too, managing it. We can do it in weeks. That's a huge difference. And I want to go back to what you mentioned on IT teams and might not having
Sure.
all the IT teams. The other thing is related to time is generally companies now ask a lot of IT and increasingly a lot more.
Yes.
So more and more is being asked of IT, and IT might not have so many headcount available and other things to be available in every city that a 3PL is in,
Right.
every new city. Maybe they're based out of Atlanta. Now they're opening a Vegas one or Inland Empire or Jersey, something like that.
Yeah.
So that complexity also increases. So the reason we're able to save a bunch of time is actually threefold. One, at the core of it is software. How we build software on procuring ISP connections to how we design networks, deploy networks. At the end of the day, we are a hardware and software technology company, and that's where our expertise lies to be able to do it really well.
Right.
So one is software to be able to get that faster. Second is scale. We now do this in millions and millions of square feet.
Yeah.
Some customers by themselves have millions of square feet with us. And so being able to do this repeatedly every day, every week, every month, we all get good at. So that's some other. Lastly, what we've seen is it's the edge cases that slow down a lot of these things.
Right.
And because of the scale that we've done it at, we've built out processes and, repeatable run books so that we can get out these edge cases. And because we also buy so many connections, do so much square footage, do so many deployments, we're able to have the right relationships when push comes to shove, really being able to deliver on that as well.
Step, step, step. Do you know how many steps your warehouse workers are taking a day? When your workers are walking, you're losing money. Endless trips to the printer or computer add up fast. Newcastle's mobile industrial carts with integrated power eliminate the walking to stationary printers and computers, keeping workers focused on high-value tasks, often doubling their output. Thousands of powered cart installations, including ones at the new warehouse's own micro-fulfillment center and in my previous jobs, prove that Newcastle customers get more done and save money. To learn more, head to newcastlesys.com. That's newcastlesys.com. Very interesting, and I think it sounds like you certainly built out this robust network for networking, I guess you could say, right? But you're able to really come in and I think take over basically the whole network side. And I'm curious because you mentioned something to me here before we kind of started recording, which I thought was pretty interesting. And certainly we were at Manifest together recently, and obviously in our space, logistics warehousing space, like there's more and more tech that's coming out and more systems, more robots, more automation, and all these things require a strong connection, right? Because they run off this stuff, and having no connection, means that you really can't do much essentially. So, but you mentioned something about commercial real estate and how so much commercial real estate has never been connected, is now coming online. So tell us a little bit about that, and why is that such a big thing now?
Yeah, just to set the stage here a little bit, commercial real estate is about 65 to 75 billion square feet. You have multifamily, retail, healthcare, offices, hospitality, and then industrial and data centers and storage and all of it. But if you look at just industrial, just in United States alone, right. You're talking about somewhere between 15 to 25 billion square feet of real estate. That is a huge amount of real estate.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right, which is, for decades, it's been mainly storage and shipping.
Yeah.
operations have been limited to that. But what we're seeing in the last 5-10 years is, we've started with the WMS systems, but then robotics, automation, pick and place, sensors, drones, all of these to enable better productivity, right? When we talk to our customers in these spaces, they're engaging in buying all these new technologies because ultimately they want each warehouse, each logistics, each distribution center, fulfillment center to be a better ROI for them.
Right.
And what we're seeing is as all of the space that has never been online is coming online, partly really driven really fast by these new technologies. Connectivity is the underpinning of all of this. If you want any of these services to work well, you need great connectivity.
Right.
You need connectivity, again, that's reliable and secure and fast to be able to service it. So let's take, automated forklifts or remote driving companies. That's a lot of video usage, a lot of bandwidth, a lot of latency. And if you have 50, 60 of them around in a warehouse,
it's eating up
how's
a lot.
that? How's that being connected? So what we're seeing is just brand new, massive amount of square footage coming online that is being driven by new technology and technology that needs connectivity to run.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting because any industry trade show we go to now, I think everywhere you just see so many things that are solutions, like you said, to increase productivity and try and generate more ROI from distribution fulfillment centers, but everything involves being connected in some way. Like there's really no way. And I've certainly been in situations where the internet goes down for whatever reason, and there's not much you can do in an operation because so much is relying on a system or something that's connected to the internet in some way. So I'm curious, through Meter, obviously, downtime is like it's like doom time basically for an operation. I would say, like a couple minutes could set you back, an hour or more or something. It just has like this exponential effect in your operation. So with Meter, how do you ensure that you're not having downtime and the connectivity is constant?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, this is a great question. And it's at the underpinning of how we even started all of our operating system. So what's really interesting is we take this approach of starting with redundancy first and making the choices that are better for customer.
Okay.
So we do redundancy on the ISPs. So we make sure there's a primary connection, there's a backup connection. Our hardware has LTE built in to be a tertiary connection. So even if the primary goes down, secondary goes down, then there's tertiary as well. And all of that is seamless in our software. Second, how we build out the hardware is so that even in the abject scenarios where there's hardware failure, there shouldn't be any way one piece of hardware actually brings down the entire network or even one area. So we build redundancy in. And a lot of what we learn from that is from data centers and how data centers keep uptime up all the time. And then lastly, because of our pricing model, because we don't charge for hardware, typically when companies go out and have to buy a bunch of this hardware, they try to skimp on it a little bit because they want to cut costs and keep it at bay. So what we end up doing is actually installing more hardware than typically that would be installed, mainly because we're planning for full capacity from day one. So there might be a bunch of hardware access points, Wi-Fi access points everywhere that are installed but are not even turned on in our software. And as usage goes up, those are turned on or off or different things. So even when one fails, there's another one that takes up and things like that. So our approach again is one, taking a very availability and redundancy approach.
Okay.
Two, designing our systems so that it doesn't happen, that one part of it affects any other. And three, taking into account that these things might happen or full capacity and installing it that way from day one. Because you're absolutely right. And I've heard this from a lot of our customers, which is, and this is one of the biggest reasons they switched to us from traditionally of buying a bunch of hardware, building a bunch of teams, spending a lot of money to us. As much as we saved them a lot of money and a lot of time, one of the big reasons they end up switching to us is the fact that they don't have to worry that when the internet goes down, their production stops.
Yeah. And I think that's huge because, I say like whenever I was in a situation, the internet went down. I mean, I was like on Slack to IT, texting IT, calling IT, because times like, and then your boss is like, well, did you email them? And I'm like, yeah. Or did you call them? Yeah, we called them. Did you text them? Yeah, we texted. Did you message them on Slack? Yes, we messaged them on Slack. So it's like, it's like, I don't want to say it's like a crisis, but in the moment it is like, a big thing because you're like, now, we're going to miss like these orders for the day or something like that. And that's, for those that are in fulfillment stuff, we live by the orders, right? So it's not having to worry about that, I think is like a big thing, not only on the operations side, but then the IT side as well. If you have operations that are running, multiple shifts like throughout the day and, you don't necessarily have full IT support at certain times, right? Like, IT doesn't want to get called at night because the network went down or something like that. So I think it's a huge win, like all around for the business, the way that you built this model to be able to support kind of constant uptime, right? And be able to do that thing. So really interesting stuff. And you mentioned it a little earlier. I want to touch on this too, because I think it's also a really good model as well, is your unique pricing model. So tell us a little bit about how that works.
Yeah. Again, I think we touched on it a little bit earlier. Normally, companies have to go spend a lot of money on hardware, installation, cabling, testing, all of these things.
Right.
Then they have to go hire a big team. That's really restrictive. Gets really expensive.
Yeah.
And so with Meter is we just charge based on the size of the space. And as companies give us more space, our pricing goes down. And as companies grow, we grow with them. So let's say they are in a distribution center that's 100,000 square feet.
Yeah.
They've had great growth. And a year later, they move to a new distribution center that's 200,000 square feet. Normally, they would have to then redo of all the costs all over again.
Right. Yeah.
What we do is we'll happily just move the contract to the new space without any cost to them again. So we just charge a maintenance fee of per square foot per month. And we take on all the costs for hardware, installation, cabling, testing, all of it, and not our customers.
Yeah. And I think that's a great model because even as you said, like, even if you're like a smaller business, I'm just thinking and you're like, oh, like we're running out of space here and like we need to go into a new space. But then, like you said, like you have to now add that cost of all that infrastructure build out again, but being able to just like transfer that over and just pay like an OpEx instead of a CapEx, like you mentioned earlier, I think is a huge thing as well. So really interesting to learn about Meter and kind of the model and how it works. I mean, I think it's really smartly done and I think a lot of operations and IT people definitely would probably appreciate the model, how it's built out, thinking about them. So before we kind of wrap up here, I'm curious, what do you think? Because there's like a lot of talk about different types of networking and internet out there, and even discussion about like 5G and stuff like that. So what do you think is really kind of the future of the internet or connectivity in the warehousing environment?
Yeah, I'll answer that really quick. I want to make sure I got the pricing stuff right. On one of the things is you were mentioning how instead of CapEx, we're doing OpEx. And that's true. But traditionally, it's huge CapEx and huge OpEx because you have an overhead of building out a big team. Yeah. So we're taking big CapEx and big OpEx and converting that into a fraction of the OpEx. And that's also one of the big drivers, especially as cash has become more crunch in the economy and things like that. Yeah. We're seeing a huge driver for it. So I wanted to make sure that part was clear too. There's a huge OpEx we're also converting down as well. Yeah. To answer your question, I think it's really interesting, right? So you've got traditional 5G, LTE, then you have wireless, then you have different spectrums coming in and things like that. One of the really challenging things actually is the fact that a warehouse or distribution center, any of these type of spaces, ends up being a Faraday cage because there's so much metal around.
With the racking,
essentially, no signals can come in, no signals can go out. So this is one of the big challenges that LTE will have and 5G will have. And private LTE is trying to solve this a little bit, but then private LTE gets incredibly expensive. Then you have to figure out where you're going to place the antennas outside the building. Then how's that going to come in? But then you still have this Faraday cage problem. Yeah. So what we're seeing, especially with Wi-Fi 6E and then now Wi-Fi 7 coming, and Wi-Fi also going into the 6 gigahertz spectrum, we actually think Wi-Fi is going to really push the industry forward, mainly because it's a signal inside of a space that's not affected by how much metal is around at the edges of each of these facilities, so that LTE and 5G can't penetrate. So we are seeing that the really forward-thinking robotics, automations, logistics, and companies that are fully automated, they're all investing in Wi-Fi rather than others that have to bring signal from the outside.
Very interesting. And I think that's a really great point there. And as you mentioned, I mean, and I actually, I recall that you mentioned that, like in my experience too, like where we've had some issues where we've moved some racking and, didn't consult with IT and it's like messed up the signal, and we're trying to tell them like, it doesn't work right here. Like, why doesn't it work right here? And they're like, well, and then they come and take a look and they're like, well, this wasn't here before. Right. So it's really interesting to think about that, especially as we look at, how warehouses are evolving too. Like, people are trying to get more space utilization. So like racking is increasing, it's getting taller, it's getting tighter together. So like, as you mentioned, it's just filling up with all this metal or steel, right? And it's all can be restrictive in that sense. So very interesting insights there, and definitely something to think about and see how things evolve in the space. So really interesting conversation with you, Anil, and I appreciate you coming on the show to talk about Meter. And kind of just connectivity in general in our space. I think it's something that we all need. I mean, it's almost like oxygen at this point within the space, I would say. So really interesting stuff. If people want to learn more about Meter and are potentially interested in installing it themselves, how can they do that?
Yeah, we're super easy to find online. We're at meter.com, meter.com. We'd love to hear from IT, operations, 3PLs, warehouse, distribution centers, everybody in warehousing logistics, actually, and even just to learn how they're trying to solve this. Again, Meter makes it really easy for any of these spaces to come online with internet, networking, Wi-Fi. So we'd love to talk to folks.
All right, great. And we'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well, so people can easily find it. So Anil, thank you once again for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much, Kevin, not just for having me on, but doing this for the warehouse and logistics community. I know we all learn a lot from your podcast.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.